My name is Rorion Gracie. I want to give you a brief history of how my family first got involved with this amazing art of Jiu-Jitsu. Back in the early 1900s, my grandfather was a very influential man in northern Brazil. So when Mitsui Maeda, a Japanese instructor of Jiu-Jitsu, came to Brazil as an aide to the Japanese immigration colony, my grandfather helped him get settled in the area. To show gratitude, he offered to teach Jiu-Jitsu to my then 13-year-old Uncle Carlos, the oldest of 5 kids. Uncle Carlos learned Jiu-Jitsu from him for a few years and then shared his knowledge with his brothers. My father eventually became a national hero in Brazil. And for me, growing up in this family with so many uncles and cousins and brothers and everybody doing the same thing was absolutely an amazing experience. I started training Jiu-Jitsu, like I said, very young. I probably had diapers under my first gi. And then eventually, by the time I was 15 years old, I started teaching classes. And when I was 17, I decided to take a trip to the United States. I came to America to spend a month. That was my idea, to take a month vacation. And decided to stay at the YMCA. And a few days after that, my ticket was stolen, my return ticket to Brazil, and all my cash was stolen. So I find myself in a really difficult spot. I talked to the airline company, and they told me it was going to take 6 months before I could get a new ticket. And by then, I have decided to stay in America. And my trip stretched to be, instead of the first original month I planned, end up staying here for a whole year. And during that time, I find myself confronting some difficulties, like having no money to eat, literally find myself panhandling the street corners, sleeping in newspapers for a few days. It was tough times. Fortunately, it didn't last long, but just enough to give me a taste of what it could be, how difficult things can get. And throughout this whole time, I find myself with a very positive outlook and all that. Even though the situation was very difficult and in a sense, a little bit scary, I was able to overcome that. And I think strongly because of the background and the upbringing techniques I had of Jiu-Jitsu and with a strong family bond and all that kind of connection. So it was a very, way for me to mature very rapidly, even though I was very young. To spend that year here was a very interesting experience for me. So I went back to Brazil after 1 year in America. All I could think about is returning to the United States. Like I said, that was 1969, 1970 was the first trip. In 1972, I came back to the States to visit some friends, and then went back to Brazil, went to law school in Brazil, graduated law school, and after that, 1978, I decided it was time for me to come to the United States, this time with the objective of establishing my family's Jiu-Jitsu in America. Knowing very well that what happens in America, the whole world becomes aware of it. So I came back to the States and had a chance to work a little bit in the movies through some friends that I'd made on my first trip. And had a chance to work in a little extra work and cross on the background in different shows on TV and stuff like that. Wonderful times. But my goal, like I said, was teaching Jiu-Jitsu. So I put some mats in my garage. And every person I met, I invited for a free class. And that free class, people would get hooked on it immediately. I happened to be an amazing teacher. And they come for the free class, fall in love with it. And I would say, hey, if you bring a friend, I'll get you another free class. If you bring 10 friends, I'll get you 10 free classes. And little by little, they would bring their friends for the first class, and people love it, and the word kept getting around. And it didn't take much. It didn't take long, until some people started saying, hey, Jorge, my former martial arts instructor, he wants to challenge you. He thinks Jiu-Jitsu is not that good. And then I said, okay, bring him in. The guys would bring their friends to the garage, and we have those challenge matches, and invariably, Jiu-Jitsu would give me the elements to overcome my opponents in a very humane way, of course. And that helped the word get around more and more and more until, after 10 years of doing this kind of stuff in my garage, like I said, hundreds of challenge matches against different styles of martial arts, I had the idea of creating the UFC, which in itself was another wave of difficulties that I had to, fight and deal with. And ultimately being able to, again, using my upbringing concepts and my beliefs and the philosophies that we practice at the Gracie family, share that concept and then just deal with that more and more, confront those difficulties and overcome that. Eventually creating the UFC in 93, I'm sure that many of you are aware of that. Royce, my brother, goes in there, puts on an amazing show. And as a result of that, the U.S. Army, liked what they saw, the little guy defeating the big guy, and then ultimately hired me to teach soldiers and create a new program for the U.S. Army and so forth. And then the whole thing exploded. With the success of being able to fulfill this dream, one day I wake up in bed saying, now what am I going to do with my life? And then I had an idea and Actually, I had an epiphany that said, Rorion, you got to do much more than just teach people how to fight. Because of your knowledge and your upbringing and the kind of habits you have, the health habits that you have, you should share with people a healthier way of living. And then based on the concept of food combining, which my Uncle Carlos was able to develop after 65 years of research, I wrote the Gracie Diet book, which literally has changed the lives of thousands of people that have embraced that concept. You don't have your headaches and stomach aches and heartburns, all that is gone. So it's something that we're going to talk about more, later on in this program. But the bottom line is this. So the summary of this stuff is that even though, like everybody else, I confronted all kinds of difficulties, like I said, from panhandling and sleeping on the newspaper on the sidewalk, through needing money to open up the first garage, to put mats on my garage, and then eventually open up an academy, and then raising money to make bigger dreams come true. It's all doable. It doesn't matter how big your dream is, how impossible it seems. If you have your mind on what you want, knowing exactly what you want, if you can identify that, you can chase and pursue and accomplish anything you want. And it's the kind of thing that I want to, make sure that you are aware of. And I want to be here to kind of inspire you to do that kind of stuff. In dealing with all these difficulties, I believe that one of the main sources of, confidence, I guess, or things that are giving me the strength to face those is being healthy. And to that, I owe 100% to my Uncle Carlos, like I said. He was the man who was way ahead of his time. As soon as my father and his his brothers, my father was the youngest of 5 boys. Uncle Carlos was the oldest one. Uncle Carlos was the first one, like I said, to learn Jiu-Jitsu, and then he shared the knowledge with his brothers. My father was physically a very frail child and eventually had to modify the traditional Japanese techniques so that he could become proficient in spite of his frail body. And on the process of doing that, he became a special, a very unique character and a major icon in the history of Jiu-Jitsu in Brazil, and eventually, of course, to the world. Well, the brothers started getting involved with the other Jiu-Jitsu. Uncle Carlos then had the space and the clear mind to be able to focus on something that he was taught was extremely important, which is find a way to keep the Gracie brothers healthy so that they could uphold the Gracie challenge against anybody, anytime, anywhere. So he started a study, an empirical study that lasted for 65 years, which is studying the different consequences of different food combination concepts. And even though he was not a doctor, he started reading the works of doctors and scientists and nutritionists, anything he could put his hands on. And he became a self-taught, nutritionist on the concept. The concept, of course, is very simple. You can eat anything you want as long as you combine the foods properly at each meal. I'm going to say that again. You can eat anything you want as long as you combine the foods properly. The idea is to keep your body alkaline. Okay, that's the concept. You want to avoid excessive acidity in your system. And on that note, the results have been absolutely incredible. I'm not a doctor. I don't know how to explain to you scientifically. You have to take my word for it. But the thousands of people that I have shared this information with, I have never heard of a person say, look, I tried the Gracie diet and I did not feel an improvement. Every single person who tries it feels amazingly healthier and better and everything else. And the question one has to ask, you have to ask yourself is this: how are you going to spend the last 10 years of your life? That's the question. Okay? We all have people that we love dearly, and as time goes by, they start getting older and older, and they start deteriorating as they get older. We all have that. Everybody has a person that you like, a grandma, great-grandma, whatever that is, or parent or whatever. And as they get old, they start getting weaker and frail, and the diseases start taking over the body. That's not a happy situation. I'm happy to announce that I saw my Uncle Carlos live until he was 94 years old, and my father lived until he was 95 years old. In fact, the last time I saw my dad, I went to visit him on his ranch. He was 94 and a half. That was 6 months before he passed away. I went to visit the old man on his ranch. He gave me a kiss and said, Rorion, let's go on a mat. I want to show you a new choke I'm working on. At 94 and a half, the guy's developing a new choke. Can you believe it? We went on a mat. He kicked my butt again, and we had a great time. So in other words, the trick is to live as long as you're young and then die. That's the trick. And how are you going to do that if you're not healthy? So, of course, a lot of people focus on making a lot of money, but by the time they get old, they have so much money, some of them, some don't even have that much money, but they spend the focus on money and they lose the focus on what's the most important thing you have, which is your health. So the concept of the Gracie diet is to enable you, my friend, to have a long, healthy, enjoyable life. You don't want to get old, you want to get young very late. That's the trick. And by knowing how to combine your foods properly, it will make all the difference in the world. So the secret to be able to enjoy life until the very last day is this. Trust me. Here's the Gracie diet, okay? Check it out. It's definitely worth looking into this. Throughout my life, I have shared countless stories of experience that I've had with my dad growing up, and told stories like this in seminars and lectures around the world. And of course, there's many more that I have not told the world yet. Maybe it's time for me to share with you some of these stories. What if I was able to share with you the vision that I have, the understanding that I have of becoming extremely resilient? No matter how bad things might be, you turn things around and it's all good. But if you could understand that, what if you could understand that everything that happens in our lives is because we are attracted to ourselves, the good and the bad. And the way I see it is if something bad happens, it becomes a positive learning opportunity. So if the bad thing becomes a learning opportunity, is ultimately a good thing. Imagine if you can start changing the way you're thinking, that everything that happens in your life is like ultimately for your benefit. Wouldn't that be interesting? Isn't that something actually good? So once you start changing the mind, the way you're thinking, the way your mind sees certain difficulties, it becomes a welcome opportunity for you to learn, for you to grow, for you to improve. Fascinating stuff. Another important aspect for us to be, I guess, accomplish the dreams, accomplish the things you want to do, is discipline, of course. It is important to develop good habits because they are as difficult to break as the bad ones. So for us in the Gracie family, the Gracie diet, for example, is not just a way of eating or just a bunch of food that you put inside. No. It's a way for you to start teaching from a very early age, to teach the kids to develop the concept of what's right and what's not. I can do this, I shouldn't do that. That concept of educating your brain, of disciplining yourself to make the right choices, is an important aspect of our lifestyle and can be extremely beneficial to everyone. How to deal with fear. Let me tell you an imaginary situation here. Let's suppose someone comes to you and says, listen, in that house across the street, in the living room of the house, there's a table, and on top of the table, there's $10 million. All you have to do is go in there and get the money is yours. However, I need to tell you that there's, around the house, there is a barbed wire fence, and there's a couple of Rottweilers in there who haven't eaten in a couple of days. They're very mean dogs. And in the living room, there's a guy with a machine gun. And as you walk in to get the money, he's probably going to cut you in half with bullets. Now the money has completely changed the value. It's no longer something that you're going to go in, just go in there and get it. You might reconsider if it's even worth it going in there. However, if I tell you that your kid is trapped in the house, you're going to figure out a way to do it. So what happened here right now is that you have seen your mission as something bigger than your fear. That's the trick. Whatever you have to do, something that is challenging, you have to find yourself enough motivation to make it so necessary that the fear becomes a secondary issue for you. Let me give you a practical example. Many years ago, my father was on a ship going from northern Brazil to Rio. Him and my uncle Carlos were on the ship. Halfway down the coast, they were far enough that you could not see shore, okay, in the middle of the ocean. And halfway down the coast, by the state of Bahia, my father is on the deck of the ship looking out in the ocean. 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the wind is blowing, and the waves are big, huge waves in the middle of nowhere. There's not blue sea, nothing like the Caribbean. It's heavy-duty gray ocean, black, and the whole thing is just intense. And my father is looking out, like I said, and he sees a man floating on the water. And he tells me the first thing he thought is that a beach nearby? Of course not. He's in the middle of the ocean. And then they saw there was a guy trying to stay afloat. And like him, a whole bunch of people saw that and they signaled to the captain, everybody. Before you know it, everybody's on the deck looking, screaming, the man's on the water, and that kind of stuff. And then the captain sends a boat with 5 sailors down to rescue the man. In the middle of the ocean, and the way that things were happening at the time, you don't just step on the brake and stop the boat next to the guy. So the boat kept moving, and by the time he turns around to come back, that kind of thing, the guy is a couple of 100 yards away. Anyway, the boat with the 5 sailors are rowing towards the man, and eventually they get where the guy is. Like I said, several yards away from the ship. And what we could, my father tells me what he could see is every time the sailors in the boat, once they finally get to where the man was, every time they got a grip on the man, the tide would lift up the little boat and they would lose grip. They were not able to pull the guy into the rescue boat. So there was like this all the time. If the boat would come back, they grab the guy, they lift it up, lose it again. And they kept on that process for a while. And my father, like everybody else, very concerned, of course, on the deck of the ship. And my father turned to his brother and said, gosh, thinking out loud, he said, how come one of those guys does not jump into the water to help the guy up into the boat? Because the guy is too weak. He obviously can't pull himself out. It's very clear, that message. And behind my father and his brother, there was a sailor. And he said, this is Abrolhos. When he heard my father's commenting about someone jumping in the water, the guy said, this is Abrolhos. That's all he said. My father had no idea what Abrolhos meant. But for us, for all of you who don't know, let me clarify that Abrolhos, the reef of Abrolhos in the coast of Brazil, is probably one of the largest concentration of sharks on the Atlantic Ocean. That's feeding ground for sharks. So the guy said, this is Abrolhos, meaning this is shark land. They're not going in. That's what the sailor meant to say. But again, all he said, this is Abrolhos. My father didn't get the message, so the advice goes one ear out the other. So, a little more time goes. The guys keep trying to drag the guy into the boat. They couldn't pull him in. And eventually, the captain signals to the guy, to the team on the boat, to return to the ship and leave the men behind. So now the sailors are rowing back to the ship, and the guy's left in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. My father, seeing that, turned to his brother and said, Carlos, the guy's left to die. How would you like to, go there and save the guy? Uncle Carlos said, Hélio, I can't make it. I don't think I can do that. My father said, I think I can. So Uncle Carlos said, well, go for it. So my dad strips down to his jocks and his socks, jumps off the deck of the ship. He said when he was airborne, he thought, what if there are sharks? You can't rewind that button. So he went flat on his tummy into the water, right? Swimming towards the guy. As he's swimming towards the guy, the boat is coming back. So when they meet, the old man said, let's go back. They go back to where the guy is. And then now that my father is next to the man, and next to the boat, he's able to help the guy. The guy's pulling this whole thing. He helps the guy up into the boat and saves the guy's life and jumps into the boat, and they'll come back to the ship. Of course, by the time they go back to the ship, the big confusion, they lift the boat up, the guys go back in, and then my father goes to his quarters, and eventually somebody comes, knocks on the door and says, listen, the captain wants to talk to you. So my father goes to the captain's quarters. Say, Captain, I'm so sorry. Don't say anything, said the captain. Please, don't say anything. Let me tell you something, Mr. Gracie. If my mother had come to visit me here, and in getting out of the boat to step into the ship, she fell in the water, and her life would depend on me fishing her out of the water with my foot, I wouldn't do it for my mother, said the captain. So what you did is absolutely incredible. Don't apologize, it was amazing. So, thank you, that's the whole kind of thing. Big, huge party for my father on the ship. The whole thing was a big deal. Many years later, the reason I'm telling you this is to get to what I started the conversation today. Many years later, I asked my father, Dad, were you afraid of doing that? He said, Rorion, I was petrified. I was much more than afraid. I was so scared that when I jumped into the water, he specifically tried not to go too deep, afraid of the shark, especially when he realized that. He tried to go flat on his tummy and then swimming towards the guy. I was so scared, he told me, that I was hoping to get to the man quick enough that if we were attacked by sharks, there will be a 50-50 chance of the shark biting him and not biting me. That's how scared he was. Swimming out like a crazy man. But the bottom line is, once again, he saw the mission of saving someone's life as something more important than him holding back and not doing it. which is understandable. If you don't want to do something because you're scared, it's okay. It makes sense. Fear is nothing but a form of intelligence. When you're afraid of something, it's because you're not sure if you're going to succeed on that project. So you say, I don't want to do it. To say, listen, let's see who is the most courageous person who can jump out of the window. No, the person who jumps out of the window is just an inconsequent person. If you're on the 10th floor, you're going to die. You're stupid. You're not courageous. You're not thinking. So, but if I know there's a net outside, then I can jump because I have the calculated situation or plan ahead. So every time we take a chance of something in life, there's nothing wrong in taking chances. Ideally, you want to calculate your risk to have a chance to do something and succeed. But sometimes you just have to take a leap of faith and just say, you know what, I have to do this. Courage is not the absence of fear. That's not courage. When you're not afraid, you're not afraid. Courage is when you're scared of something, you're trembling on your legs, and you still do what must be done. That's courage. So what I'm telling you, my friends, is that sometimes in life we find ourselves really scared of taking a certain step. If you are prepared for that, if that's something you really want to do and you think that you can succeed, sometimes you have to take a step and say, you know what, this is so important that I have to do this, and just make it happen. Anybody has the tools to make things like that happen. A lot of times people think, well, you have to have something extremely special, or you have to have a lot of money to make something succeed. Let me remind you that Apple, Google, Disney, Ford, Amazon, even Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, we all started in a garage. Guess what? Do you have a garage? Go make it happen. Whatever you want. It's all doable. It's all possible. You just have to understand exactly what you want. Determine what you're looking for. What do you want? Define that and go chase it. What if I could share with you some of the inspirations I had, and to kind of hopefully get you inspired, get you motivated to chase anything you want. So once again, you can accomplish anything you want. All you have to do is just kind of in your mind, define what you want, and understand that position yourself to get whatever you want. Position yourself to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to get this stuff done. And of course, take action. It helps if you're prepared to do whatever you want. You want to be a musician, read, study, prepare yourself. But ultimately, you have to take action to make anything happen that you want. I want to share with you some tricks and some principles on how to get there. All right? What a lot of people see as coincidence, how things happen in our lives, I don't believe on that. I think that everything that happens in our lives is for a reason. I want to use as an example for this how I met my friend Chuck Norris. Chuck had gone to Brazil to promote one of his many successful movies. And in Brazil, somebody took him to the Gracie Academy, where he met my dad, who, like everybody else, was a big fan. So Chuck went to the academy, had the opportunity to train with my father a little bit. And my father said, listen, I have a son that lives in Los Angeles. So when he came back to the United States, he called me up. I was teaching class in my garage, and hey, hi, this is Chuck Norris. Of course, I said, wow, cool. So anyways, we talked for a little bit, and eventually he came to my house, driving this big, huge stretch limo and everything. And came to my house, and I showed him the video, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in action at the time. He was very impressed, and he actually kind of supported the promotion of the video and everything else. And a week later, I got a phone call from his assistant inviting me to be the guest instructor at his event in Las Vegas, where he gathered, a couple of hundred people from his association. Of course, I was, honored with that, and, talked to them, brought a whole bunch of brothers and cousins to go with me, and we went to Vegas and we shared some, knowledge with them and showed them some jiu-jitsu stuff. It was the first official big introduction of jiu-jitsu to the American audience, in the large scale. So having the support from Chuck Norris could not have been a better blessing for all of us, and we're very appreciative of that. Chuck eventually got involved in jiu-jitsu, kept training, became even tougher than he was, and has a black belt in jiu-jitsu, has been a friend of many members of the Gracie family and so forth. So it's been a great opportunity for us to run into that guy and just stay friends with him for so many years. So there's no coincidence. Things happen for a reason. You watching this video today is no coincidence. So now I want to share with you a very special opportunity, something that I've been working on for a while. It's a very unique program. I have shared this information privately in different circumstances with small crowds of people, but never made it possible through the internet like we're going to do now. It's called the Gracie Mindset. The Gracie Mindset is a program that's going to help you change the way you think. You know, for those who have the spirit of transformation, for those who are ready to listen and learn about a philosophy that can help you accomplish the impossible. Imagine, let me give you an example here. Imagine a freeway, right? Cement everywhere. These huge blocks of cement, 30, 40 feet up in the air. Okay? And then a little bird flies by, drops a seed in a little tiny crack of the freeway. And that seed stays there until some dirt is blown over and the rain comes by, gets it wet, and literally like a miracle, that little seed starts to grow. And I'm sure you're driven by the freeway and you've seen a little tiny green plant growing on the side. If you don't cut the little green plant, it keeps growing, becomes a huge plant in there. Isn't that amazing? That out of nowhere, that little tiny seed that was dropped there by a bird flying by, mixed up with a little bit of dirt and a little bit of rain, and just life happens that way. If a little tiny seed can become a big plant, we're absolutely against all odds. Think of the possibilities of what you can accomplish. This is what this program is about, is to help you accomplish the impossible. I must tell you that there's limited enrollment. So if you haven't registered at this point, I please ask you to scroll down, click the button, and sign up now. This is the first and maybe the only class we're going to offer on the Gracie Mindset. You don't want to miss this one. Hope to see you soon.